All right, so then I'll go on with the transition. So as you may know, like migrating a DHT on a live network is quite challenging, and that is because, so what happens now is when I make a DHT lookup request, I will find the right node in my routing table and send them the request. And the request will, in the request, I will say, okay, I want this CID. And what the node will do is we'll take this CID, hash it, and then look inside their routing table, what's the closest peer, and give it back to me. And now with the upgrade, I send them directly the hash, so they don't have to hash my input anymore. They can directly look into their routing table, so it's cheaper for them, it's good. But it means that they have to know if it's a private request or, let's say, a legacy normal request. And so the nodes that are already running and that are not updating do not support this kind of requests yet. So it means that we need a migration. And so that's interesting. So what we could do is we could start a new DHT, which means that we keep the old DHT, we put up a new DHT, and so each libp2p node would, so the new libp2p node, let's say from the next version where it's implemented, are part of both DHT. So it means that they will publish content in both DHT, in the private way and in the non-private way. And they will look up for content in both DHTs. But it's not that good because currently we are running, so in implementation, 4 DHTs, 1 client LAN, 1 server LAN, and the same client and server for the wide area network. So it means that we'll need to get to 8 DHTs. And so to the state of the routing table would just like double. And yeah, it's not really desired. And it also means that for the next upgrade, we'll need to just create 4 more DHTs and 4 more DHTs. So if we get to apply, for instance, the great PIR proposal, then we need to break it again. And so we will end up maintaining a lot of different DHTs, and that's not really desirable. So what we could do, a better solution, could be to have an upgradable DHT, which means that we have one network where all of the peers are connected together, but it would support multiple type of requests. So how can this work? So each node needs to now to keep track of the versions, like the protocol version of all of the other nodes in its routing table. And what we want to do is we want to prefer the nodes that are running the same protocol version as us. So for instance, if I am running the new, so if I support the private routing request, and the old request as well, I will prefer to have in my routing table other node that can do the private request, because that's something I want to do. And so I will be more interested in having them than having like old nodes. So now the replacement policy in the bucket is if you have some space in the bucket and you have a new peers following in it, then it will just accept it. But so what we could do is if the bucket is full, so now what we do, if the bucket is full, we just don't take the peer, just put it on a waiting list. But now if the bucket is full, but we hear about the new peers that supports the new capability, and we have an old peer in the routing table, we just discard the old peer and take the new one instead. So that the old requests, I can still perform them because all of the nodes support, I mean the newer nodes support both kind of requests. And I'm more likely to be able to make a new request because I know more peers that support this new request. So what will change? So the K bucket with a high ID, which is the nodes that are close to me in the small bucket, will not change because there are no better candidates, or there are not a lot of candidates in this bucket, so the peers will not be evicted. But the buckets that are far away from me, so the buckets with a low ID, are going to have a lot of candidates. And so it means that I can just cherry pick the one that I want, so the newer one that support the private retrieval. And so if we make now an analogy, so forget about like the academic source space and so on. You can close your eyes if you want. if you want to find some location in the real world, so let's say, GPS coordinate, what are you going to do? So the way it is done, so we do it in the real world and in academia, is we do it like we get to the content in logarithmic steps. So we first take big steps and then small steps. So you're going to jump on the car, go on the highway, then go out to the closest exit, get on national road, then on the regional road, local road, and then you'll get to your place, to the place you want to go. And now if we imagine, so to make an analogy with the Academy XR space, you have a specific location on the map where you should go, but you will not actually go to this location, but you'll go just to the closest location that has a road, because you want to stay on the road. And so you will do this analogy. And now we can suppose that the new private request, so going there by car isn't private because people can follow you and know the stuff you're looking at. But now we can imagine that you get there by train. But so you need to have a train network. So when you go, you decide either to do the private request, so you get on a train and get there by train, or you go on your car and you do the normal request. And so it works, but at the beginning, the train network will be, let's say, less developed, which means that the closest location to your to the exact location you want to go has to be a train station. So it's probably going to be more far away than if you were with a car, but it's no problem because you don't want to get to the exact location, you want to get to the closest train station. So it also works and you will get there faster. But now it means that we have to maintain two different networks, right? We have to maintain the roads and the rails. And so that's the 2DHT. But what if we could just take our existing roads and add some rails there, right? So we would have some trams that would run on the road. So we'll still need to keep like one single infrastructure, but that can do everything. And so that's like the analogy where you keep the same piers, so you keep the same road, but you just upgrade them, and you're going to drop the old roads that don't have rails. And so that's what I call the DHT Tram upgrade, because we want to add rails on the road. And let's make the interplanetary route upgradable so that we can have an interplanetary monorails, or our road can support like rockets in the future, so we can upgrade our DHT according to the request. So now the RPC that we have, so we will want new RPCs. So for private provide and private lookup, basically when you will provide some content, you'll just take the train, go to the closest train station, and put your pointer there. And anyone that wants to get it by the train will just take the train as well and go to the same place where you left it. And so that's for the train, but then the find pier wouldn't change. So it's still the road, because the regional roads around you, we have to keep them. We have to be very precise when we find pier, which is not the case for find content. So we will keep the existing infrastructure for the find peer RPC, and so the old or current provide and lookup will still be accessible, because we can still drive on the road. Now, just some load calculation. So what we expect is not much more load to be on the new DHT. So now the current load is we have, basically for each node, we have all of the requests and divide by the peer number, and that's the expected load. But now, if some of the load goes to the private, like the private request, then the legacy node would have less traffic, so like the same request minus the private request. And the upgraded peers will still have the, let's say, the load for the old request, plus the load for the new private request, but but this is expected to be very bounded because we expect that the number of private requests will grow with the number of private peers, which would be scalable. And so yeah, just a small remark is, so if we do this, let's say train and car analogy, at some point we may want to just drop the road and have rails only because it's better. But it will just break the old node because they cannot get anywhere anymore. So what we want to do is that the newer version prefer to be connected with the newer version, and the older version are connected with the older version, so that if they want to still do their own DHT, very legacy, they can do it. They can stay on their road even if the rest of the network has moved on. And so that already works for the newer node, so young prefer young, but old prefer old. The current node have no mechanism to make a distinction between the, let's say, the older and the newer node, and so they will likely pick, let's say, young, where we want them to prefer old for, yeah, just to keep the network running. And so for this, maybe one ultimate migration would be required in order to let the older peer, just not to break them. And so, yeah, quickly for the transition period, at the beginning, we want to push support for the private request to the libp2p DHT server node. I guess at the beginning, when there is not so much adoption, the content provider will want to push content to both DHTs so that newer and older client can find the content. Then we can ship a new client that can perform private lookup that will already be available from the start. So if the content has been published in the new private DHT, let's say on the overlay rail, you will be able to find it. But if the provider content didn't publish it there, then you may want to fail over to do a legacy lookup. And then after some adoption, the content provider will just stop publishing to the old DHT. And maybe at some point, so it still has to be decided if we want to break the old nodes to force them to upgrade, or if we just allow them to keep their old DHT, we may stop supporting the legacy content request. Yeah, that's call out for breaking DHT protocol changes. So if you plan on breaking the DHT, I think, so even if the DHT is upgradable, we should minimize the number of protocol versions. So please let me know if you plan to break something so that we can group the changes and make only, break it once. And so to conclude, so this double hashing DHT brings a significant reader privacy improvement, but it's not perfect, as we've seen it. It also brings provider record authentication, stronger than what we have today, and we also have in bonus a small writer privacy improvement in the DHT. We have a low overhead, as we've seen, and it is interoperable with other content router, such as the indexer. The implementation of the DHT is almost over. We still need to test and still need to make the decision for the upgrade and make a more precise roadmap. So you can also look at the spec if you're interested. And yeah, that was it.